Let's move on to It Follows, directed in 2014, written and directed by David Robert Mitchell. After a seemingly innocent sexual encounter, 19-year-old Jay finds herself plagued by strange visions and an inescapable sense that someone or something is following her. Faced with this burden, Jay and her friends must find a way to escape the horrors that seem to be only a few steps behind. This film was a $2 million budget, very successful with $23 million box office, with even just a limited release. Stars Micah Monroe as Jay, who is terrific in this movie, and she sort of is like one of these like new modern scream queens because she had a few back-to-back great horror movies. She did The Guest, which is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I liked her in The Guest a lot, and then she made this, and she's also been in another horror film with Bill Skarsgård, ironically, who's also in this episode.
She was in the Independence Day sequel as well.
Yeah, so she's an awesome young actress. She brings a very natural like vulnerability to her characters, and you combine that with her soft beauty, and she makes a very innocent and relatable person on camera.
Yeah, It Follows has the strength of having an incredible premise for a movie monster where this thing is, whatever it is, the entity is invisible to everyone unless you've been cursed by it. And the way the curse spreads is people spread it to each other by having sex with each other. And then once you've been given the curse, you can see the entity. But just like it can transform and morph its shape and persona into all sorts of into any kind of person it wants to.
The interesting thing about It Follows is the monster, the entity, wherever you want to call it, it's basically a new sexually transmitted disease that has no cure and 100% fatality rate. And it creates this like linked chain of human emotion, desperation, and fear because it's not everyone who's had sex and been cursed with it is being followed. It's just one at a time. This entity is going down this chain of connected human beings through sex, one at a time, sometimes going back up the chain, sometimes coming down, until eventually, I guess, it finds its final victim, which will probably never happen.
Yeah.
And sex is a main theme in this film, and is the director trying to say there are negative effects to having sex at a young age, or sex without intimacy or love is meaningless? It's clearly a major theme and something that a lot of young adults and teens deal with in their lives, because sex is a huge factor in a lot of things that young adults do in their lives, because a lot of things we choose or paths we choose in life or decisions we make are related to sex and attraction.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it could be that. It could also be the loss of innocence and the loss of adolescence after having sex for the first time, and then also the demons of if we have demons in our childhood, they can haunt us into adulthood, and they can like dominate us and end up maybe killing us in certain ways. So I think the monster can represent all sorts of things based on, I mean, what you personally think and perceive from it. I think they keep it open, and they never really reveal what the monster is, how it got there, what it does. I think they keep it a mystery so that and they keep it ambiguous so you can make up your own interpretation of it.
Yeah, and obviously it has a lot of similar themes to past horror movies, like sex is a big one, because although in like other horror movies it's all about the virgin and losing your virginity, this movie it's not like you lose your virginity, it's just you have sex with someone who's been cursed. So you don't have to be a virgin to become cursed with the It Follows entity.
Yeah. What's funny in this movie is the guys are just like constantly trying to have sex with Jay under these horrible circumstances. Like people are dying and like horrible things are happening, but Greg and Paul are just like trying to sleep with her every chance they get.
Guys are going to be guys. And this was very close to being a perfect movie, in my opinion. This is one of my favorite horror movies in the last decade for sure. I just think that the ending with the whole pool scene and the way they lure the It entity to try to stop it, that kind of was a little bit of a downstroke in climactic tone for me. But aside from that, this movie is phenomenal. It's terrifying too.
Yeah, I would say that I also agree that it could have been a great film. It's still a very good film, but I think that the mystery element is great, but also it kind of affected the monster in a way where we weren't really sure what it can do or what it can't do, because in the first half all it does is walk, but then it can
throw stuff into the pool.
Throw stuff into the pool, and then also it's like, if it's like, how does it, like if you fly a plane to a different country, how does it find you there? Because I mean, yeah, it can become certain things, but is it intelligent enough to know like what kind of plane to book a plane or to walk on the right plane at the right time, even though it's invisible? Like, oh, this plane's gonna take me here, and then I gotta use my GPS to find them here. So is there a way where the entity can like psychically find these people that have the curse? So I think if there was something like that to show like how the entity can track down the people that are cursed, I think it would have helped the audience a little bit more.
Exactly, but still, again, very good horror movie, awesome monster, tons of similarities to horror classics, like that. Some people, I would even put in the ranks of like Halloween and Friday the 13th. So like Halloween, we have the slow pacing psychopathic killer that will never stop once it kills its victim, with that synth heavy score, Freddy Krueger with like things that only the victims can see. And the soundtrack to this movie is phenomenal. It was made by Disaster Piece. And the music is very much the heartbeat to the film because it's incredibly important to bring intense fear to an audience member in horror movies. And it could be hard in this kind of movie because a lot of the times the entity or the monster, it just is like a harmless or non-threatening being or entity. Like sometimes just like some old lady walking towards you.
Easy to escape.
In the distance, it's like obviously you just run away. It's like kind of weird looking, but still. But as soon as the entity or it is on camera, Disaster Piece's score blast. We get those crazy synths, and it's so loud, and it adds so much fear to every scene that the entity is in.
Yeah, I agree. It's an amazing score. And also, this film has a pretty perfect first act. So the film opens with that girl in the neighborhood, and she's wearing high heels with pajamas, and it's a weird thing to be wearing. And she's backtracking on the street, and then there's a neighbor who's asking if she's okay. Is everything all right? And she keeps saying she's fine. And then we don't even know what's going on. And then she drives in her car, and she keeps looking back as she's driving. And then it cuts to her dead body on the beach, and her leg's been bent backwards. And that's the opening of the film, and you're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, it's a really interesting opening.
Yeah, and then the rest of the first act is Jay and Hugh are dating, and they have a couple of dates, and things just seem a little weird, and Hugh keeps like looking back and like checking things in the background. And then when they're in the movie theater, he has them leave the movie early because he keeps looking back and he sees something in the theater. And then when they're walking to his car, he keeps looking back in fear, and we're like, what exactly is going on here? What's he afraid of? And then it cuts to that great scene where they have sex in his car, and everything seems fine. And then she's hanging her head out the door of the car, and she seems like very happy in the moment. And then he just comes up behind her and chloroforms her with a rag, and you're like, oh, what is happening? And then that leads to the best scene in the movie, I think, is where she's strapped to the wheelchair, and he gives her the rundown of what exactly is going on with the monster and the curse. And then the entity shows up as that naked woman, and it's an incredible, great first 20 minutes of the movie that I think is the strength of the movie.
Yeah. The first opening scene, their opening scenes are very crucial in horror films, and this is one of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I love the way they shot this with, a lot of the film has these really wide lens shots, and I think the director really wants you to see as much as you can in the atmospheres and in the environments to see, like, because there are little snippets that you can actually go back and watch and see little things that are going on in the background, especially in scenes where there are large crowds. And the opening scene is just that one camera, and he pans like 180, and goes 180 back, and you're just watching this girl. The way they filmed this movie was great because, again, watch it again, tons of wide-angle shots. You can see in these crowded situations where the director purposely has multiple people will often be very far away, but just walking towards the camera, towards the characters, and just in the back of your mind, you're thinking, is one of those things the entity? And it's very scary when the monster's in close proximity, especially when Jay goes into her kitchen and the naked girl is in the kitchen, and then when she's trying to lock herself in her bedroom, and you think she's safe because she's surrounded by her friends and her family, and that's the thing. Usually in horror movies, people are going to be fine if they're with people around them usually. And then the entity just goes right through the bedroom, right behind her friends and her family, and comes right after her again. She just has to jump out the window.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, and it's such a good concept for a monster.
And in terms of sex being a factor in how you spread the curse, sex seems to be something the monster uses as well, because when the entity kills Greg, it has the shape of that older woman, and it seems to be like it straddled him and is humping him in a kind of way, and it interlocks its hands with his. So it seems to be having sex in some way with Greg as it's killing him. So maybe that's a way that it feeds on people.
Interesting thought.
Yeah.
And the timeline of this film is kind of all over the place. And again, going back to the opening scene, the beauty of that opening scene is we don't know if it's before the story. We don't know if it's after the story. We don't know if it's during the story. So that's what's cool about it. You don't know what timeline we're bouncing in between. And even the director has like different types of objects from different eras. You know, in the scene where before Jay's being possessed or being chased by the entity, she's in her living room with her friends, and they have this very old-fashioned television, but one of the girls or one of her friends has this like modernized like pocket reader book. There's old like furniture and old portraits on the walls. So we don't really know always what timeline or what time in human history we're in or what even world we're in. So it's cool because I love the opening scene. You don't know where or when it's taking place.
Yeah, it's a good point. But I love the ending because...
After the pool scene?
Yeah, after the pool scene, because Jay and Paul end up having sex, and they kind of aren't sure if they did kill the entity. And then it has that great final shot where they're walking through the neighborhood holding hands, and they have these looks on their faces like they don't feel like, they still feel like they're in danger. And that last shot is we're leading them, and then there's a person like 100 feet behind them, just following them.
Paul basically sacrifices his life and his future to be one step in line ahead of Jay in the inevitable chain of death of the entity, to protect her and to also be with her. In the way he ensures that he'll always be a step ahead of her also is there's a shot of him going to pull up next to sex workers too. So he's trying to keep the monster a step ahead of them at all times.
The things guys do to get laid.
Again, same thing with Ben in It. You got a childhood crush. Just let that go, man. Great movie. Highly original monster, and it's truly a terrifying film. Great second feature from David Robert Mitchell. Amazing score and music from Disaster Piece. Check this movie out if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it in a while, go watch it again.